It's just after sunrise. We're at the Willow Springs parking area in Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area. What you're looking at here is the Rainbow Mountains. This is the very northern section of the Rainbow Mountains. And then we circle around and you see the Keystone Thrust straight ahead. And then here's White Rock Mountain. So it just gives you an idea, perspective, where we are right now. And the goal for today is to begin our exploration of the Rainbow Mountains. There's an upper Crest Ridgeline, a northern section of the upper Crest Ridgeline that goes above these mountains and behind. And what we're going to do is, and here you see the northernmost peaks in the Rainbow Mountains. We want to summit every peak eventually in the Rainbow Mountains and document those peaks. But for now, we're just going to take that upper Crest Ridgeline. You can't see it from here, but we're going to take it as far as we can. There is a northern and a southern section to the upper Crest Ridgeline, and they're separated around Mount Wilson. Just south of Mount Wilson, there's a huge gap between the northern and the southern section. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore the northern section, see if we can get to that gap. We've been to Bridge Mountain so far, but not to the actual gap a little beyond Mount Wilson. So that is our goal for today. We'll see what happens. This is the first Saturday in November. It is about 38 degrees where we are right now. And I predict that it's going to be 10 degrees cooler when we hit that ridge line. So that's 28. However, the time will be in our favor because it'll be later in the day, and looks like we're going to have some sun today. So maybe we'll be in about 40 degrees most of the day. We don't know, but we'll sure find out in just a little bit. So anyway, let's go ahead and what we're going to do from this Willow Springs parking area, we're going to head up Rocky Gap Road and then make a connection to the upper Crest Ridgeline. I'll show you where that is off of Rocky Gap Road. It's a pretty cool little route that's unmarked, but it's a regular trail. And we'll take that up to the upper Crest Ridgeline and then begin heading south on the upper Crest Ridgeline. So here we go. Okay, here we are at the trailhead, or the beginning of Rocky Gap Road, actually. And you see a sign for White Rock Mountain. That's one of the choices here. Awesome trail that circles White Rock Mountain. It's about 5 miles and makes a great running trail, hiking trail. But on the other side here is something very important to our trip today. North Peak and Bridge Mountain. These are 2 points off of the upper Crest Ridgeline, and we're heading in this direction. So what you can do is you could pause the video and enlarge the sign, and it'll give you more details about North Peak. Anyway, let's go ahead and head up Rocky Gap Road. We're going to head toward North Peak on the Rainbow Mountains upper Crest Ridgeline. as long as we're cataloging the entire Rainbow Mountains. Here is the northernmost peak. I don't even know if it's got a name. Small little thing, but when you get up there and start climbing, you can see that there's some cliff action happening up near the summit. And then here's another peak. That's the second peak, just south of the northernmost peak that we looked at. I don't know that it has a name. There are a couple more peaks before you get to Bridge Mountain, which is what people normally think of as the northernmost peak in the Rainbow Mountains. So, as you can see, if we're going to catalog all of the Rainbow Mountains, there are a few peaks that do not have names and are north of the peaks that people recognize. By the way, if you're thinking of taking a vehicle up Rocky Gap Road, just realize that that vehicle will need to be prepared to handle stuff like this. And this is a tame section of Rocky Gap Road. It gets rockier, so it's well named. And I have actually passed up a number of vehicles as I'm running down Rocky Gap Road that are stuck and something's broken down. Something has gotten jarred loose or a tire destroyed or an axle on this road. So yeah, be prepared for some real challenges to your vehicle on Rocky Gap Road. Like I said, this is a very tame section compared to what's ahead. Okay, and now, pretty cool thing. We are at the juncture of 3 major wilderness areas. Here you can see the sign for entering the Rainbow Mountain Wilderness. And over here, and looking ahead, you can see the Keystone Thrust. That's in the La Madre Mountains Wilderness. And where we parked was in Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area below. So yeah, 3 major wilderness areas, and we're at the juncture right at this very spot. So onward. And by the way, as far as size, I'm not sure what the size of the Rainbow Mountain Wilderness is. You can look it up. But I do know that the La Madre Mountains Wilderness is 4 times the size of Red Rock Canyon. So it is huge, and a lot of people don't even know it exists. And there it is ahead above us. But we are heading to the Rainbow Mountains Wilderness, and we will then skirt above the top of the Rainbow Mountains from the northern end as far as we can get. Hopefully we'll get to the gap at Mount Wilson between the northern and the southern section of the Rainbow Mountains Wilderness. Okay, I'm going to try to document the northern Rainbow Mountains pretty well here. And what you're looking at is the northernmost peak of the Rainbow Mountains, a couple peaks north of, maybe 3 peaks north of Bridge Mountain. And then you're looking over to White Rock Mountain, and we are on Rocky Gap Road and continuing upward. And there you see the Keystone Thrust on this side, and eventually we'll do the same thing with the Keystone Thrust, where we will take as much of the Keystone Thrust northward as is possible. We shall find out. Okay, onward. And here's a great perspective of the first 2 peaks in the Rainbow Mountain wilderness. There's the northernmost, and here is the next peak in line. We'll keep track of these as we continue to ascend Rocky Gap Road and just see how many peaks we're looking at before you hit Bridge Mountain. And here we are looking back at the Keystone Thrust, and you're looking at El Bastardo and La Madre Mountain. I mean, El Bastardo and El Padre Mountain on the Keystone Thrust, I believe. Okay, now we're looking at the northernmost peak of the Rainbow Mountains. And you see that gap between, oh my gosh, a lot of class 4 and 5 between that and the next peak. And then beyond that peak, there is yet another peak. We'll get a closer look as we ascend further. Okay, here's yet another peak in the Rainbow Mountains, and technically this may be the furthest north. We don't know. It's a small peak, but what we're looking at here is peak number 3. There it is. And then here's peak number 2. And then over to peak number 1. And you have White Rock Mountain in the background there. And so there you see the northernmost section of the Rainbow Mountains. Okay, continuing on Rocky Gap Road. And yes, looking back, I do believe that El Padre is on the right, El Bastardo is on the left. And you can see, if you can pick it out between the two, you can see Burnt Peak. We'll zoom in even further. El Padre, Burnt Peak, El Bastardo. Okay, now even more clear. There's the way north peak. But then as you're looking at the 3 main peaks in line, there is the 3rd peak. Second peak in the Rainbow Mountains. And here's what we call the northernmost peak, and behind it is White Rock Mountain. And now we can see more of the Keystone Thrust. We looked at El Bastardo and El Padre Mountains earlier. And here are more of the high points along the Keystone Thrust. Rocky Gap Road and that way north peak in the Rainbow Mountains. There are a few shortcuts on Rocky Gap Road. If you are not a motorized vehicle, take advantage. Here's another one right at the top of that last one. Definitely they don't want vehicles on these. And there's Rocky Gap Road. Okay, here's an awesome perspective. What we're looking at here is There's peak number 3 that I pointed out, the third peak south of the northernmost tip of the Rainbow Mountains. And then there's peak number 2. And looking down, you've got to the left is the way north peak. and then below in the light is actually the what I called the northernmost peak, and then behind it is White Rock Mountain, and then there's El Bastardo, El Padre, and you can see Burnt Peak up there on the Keystone Thrust. And we're looking down Rocky Gap Road, and now we're looking along the Keystone Thrust. And you can see it gets a little wild up there, but looks fairly passable. We don't know. We'll find out at some point. But you can see how it continues on. But what I wanted to point out here as we advance along Rocky Gap Road is that if you look carefully, you can see a ridge ahead. Just look at this next height on the right. There's that next height in the Rainbow Mountains, and then between that and peak number 3 up here is the ridge we're going to take to ascend to the summit of the Keystone Thrust. And maybe you can see that ridge. You got to look very carefully, but it's going to, I'm tracing it right now, it's going to summit right up there. I traced it all the way up. It's going to summit right in that area. We're going to take a right and continue along the upper Crest Ridgeline, northern section of the Rainbow Mountains. So here we go. But wow, what a beautiful view all around us. Okay, here you're seeing the upper Crest Rainbow Mountain Ridgeline. And yeah, I'm catching this because it's the last time we'll be able to catch it before the sun tops that ridge, and we are blinded in that direction. But I want you to notice, let's see if we can get around this tree here. Here's a decent perspective of that ridge that will take us up to the upper Crest Ridgeline. And the turnoff here on Rocky Gap Road is just beyond where I am. I'll show you when we get to it. It's unmarked, so you got to know where it is. But anyway, if you look in the foreground there, you can see a ridge ascending up to this area, and I'll trace it back down. Like I said, we are losing our visibility of the top of the ridge line because of the rising sun. But anyway, you can see tracing that ridge down. If you saw that ridge in the foreground, that's the ridge we're going to ascend, and we'll take a closer look when we get on that ridge, plus how to get to that ridge. Okay, this is the spot. This is where we leave Rocky Gap Road, and you can see a parking area to the right. And when you see this parking area, it's the first parking area of any size to the right on Rocky Gap Road. When you see that parking area, the reason it's there is that people drive up here to do exactly what I'm doing right now. And look at this. Right here, there's a little cairn. I don't trust cairns, so that may or may not be here. So look for the parking area. But that cairn says head down this way, and it's going to take you over and around. And if you look carefully, you can see a trail going up to the top of this approach ridge, and then the approach ridge goes up to the upper Crest Ridgeline. That's what we're going to take. Now, alternately, what you could do is stay on Rocky Gap Road. It's a lot shorter. Stay on Rocky Gap Road till you reach the summit of Rocky Gap Road, and there will be a trailhead for North Peak. Take that trailhead and you can bypass everything that we're going to do today. The reason I'm doing this instead is it's so much more beautiful, and also it gives you an experience of the northern area on the Rainbow Mountain Upper Crest Ridgeline. You see, we're going to take that ridgeline. We're going to take a right up there where the sun is, and we're going to continue along the top of that ridgeline. Now you can see it from the bottom. You're going to see pictures of Rocky Gap Road from up on the ridge. And believe me, it becomes very small very quickly because this ridge just ascends like crazy. So anyway, yeah, there's probably 1,000 feet between where I'm standing right now and where the sun is topping the ridge line. And we're going to make that 1,000 feet in just, I don't know, in less than a mile. So, okay. So there you have it. And then just looking around so you can see the perspective. There's the third peak in the Rainbow Mountains, Upper Crest Ridgeline, and there's the Keystone Thrust behind us and Rocky Gap Road. And by the way, after all this photography, I know that I'm going to be way behind in time. So on the way back, what I'm going to do is take Rocky Gap Road down. So you'll see what Rocky Gap Road is like above this area. So this is going to be a big circuit. So, okay, onward. Okay, looking up toward Rocky Gap Road, and you can see there's a little trail I took at that cairn, and it crosses a wash here, and there's another cairn marking the spot. But like I said, don't trust that cairns will ever be there, because this is a crazy wash, and the first flash flood's going to wipe everything out in the wash. But you can see how you actually have a fairly good trail, and it stays this good all the way up to the Upper Crest Ridgeline. So this, yes, there are a few little spots here, but yeah, you can see it is a trail. And you can see that it begins to ascend very dramatically. So we'll catch it a little further up. Okay, as you can see down below us is that car that was parked on Rocky Gap Road. There's Rocky Gap Road. In fact, there's a car coming up Rocky Gap Road at this point. But as the crow flies, we're only about 100 yards from Rocky Gap Road. Look how much we have ascended in this brief time. So that's one thing I'll point out. Another thing I'll point out is that, yes, we are on a regular trail. So, and it's a decent trail. I've seen worse trails that are well marked and well known. We can call this Rocky Gap Trail. We can call this the Northern Upper Crest Ridgeline Approach Trail. That might be better. And it's going to take us up this ridge and right up to where the rising sun is, where we will top the ridge and take a right. So, continuing on, and again, below us is a vehicle that is looks like a very rugged vehicle, but boy, they're being very careful. And this is an easy section. of Rocky Gap Road compared to some of the other sections. You can see they're not making any land speed records down there. And so the options for us are continuing on up Rocky Gap Road, as it looks like this vehicle may be doing below us, until you hit the upper ridge on Rocky Gap Road, and then you can head up to Bridge Mountain, North Peak from there if you've got a vehicle like the one below. That's the way to do it. But then you miss all the cool things we're going to see today up on the upper Crest Ridgeline. So, and there you see Rocky Gap Road continuing along, and we'll see more of that. And then you can see the Keystone Thrust continuing above us. And there's a point, let's see if I can get beyond this tree. There's a point where we look down on the Keystone Thrust. Oops. This is a really loose rock that I'm on. Yeah, right at this point we stood not long ago. That was in the western approach to La Madre Mountain page. We stood right in this area and looked down on Rocky Gap Road, right along this section of Rocky Gap Road. So, yeah, give you a perspective where we are in terms of what's around us. Well, we'll probably be breaking out the sound muffler soon, but there you see the Keystone Thrust on the other side of Rocky Gap Road. We're still only about 100 yards from Rocky Gap Road as the sprinter sprints if they could. And here you see Rocky Gap Road below us. It's right down in that area that we left Rocky Gap Road. There it is going in the other direction. And there's that way north peak in the Rainbow Mountains. And there's the Keystone Thrust. And here is the upper Crest Ridgeline, the northern section, and you see right into the sun, which makes it hard to actually see, but up ahead you see that we're going to top this next ridge, and then we're going to head straight up into the sun. And then we'll take a right on the upper Crest Ridgeline and continue on. So that gives you a perspective where we are. Okay, we've gone to the mic muffler now. Hopefully it's working. So you can see we're continuing to ascend, and you can see the area just to the left of the sun where we will ascend up to the summit of that ridge line and then take a right and continue on. This is to give you an idea. We're still only, as the crow flies, about a quarter mile from above Rocky Gap Road. So yeah, it's a lot of rapid ascent to get to this point. And you can even see the car that was parked on Rocky Gap Road at that parking area. We will zoom in on it here. There it is. And here's how far we are from it. Or I should say above it. Wow. Keystone Thrust, great views with the sun behind us. This is the time to catch the Keystone Thrust, and by the time we get up to the summit of this rainbow upper Crest Ridgeline, we'll be able to look back and see Griffith Peak beyond the Keystone Thrust. But there you get a great view of the Keystone Thrust, and where we were standing on that Keystone Thrust Summit page of LasVegasAreaTrails.com is right in this area. And there is El Bastardo, and you can see Burnt Peak also. Burnt Peak is to the right. El Bastardo to the left, Burnt Peak very small to the right. There's Burnt Peak right in the center, El Bastardo on the Keystone Thrust. Next peak beyond Burnt Peak would be El Padre, then La Madre Mountain. Okay, here we are at a demarcation here. You can see the color of the rock has dramatically changed right at this spot, and some have referred to this very spot where the color changes as the Keystone Thrust line. So yeah, looking back, you see the color, and then you see how it's changed to a darker color. And then looking ahead, yeah, now we're on lighter color that looks more like the Rainbow Mountains. So continuing on up, just wanted to show you this point of demarcation between the two types of soil and rock. Okay, now the trail gets a little less obvious as we enter a rockier section, but as you can see, there are cairns that are now appearing to mark the way. Well, here we are at a very high point now, and you can see the rocks we've ascended, but there wasn't more than one spot where I needed to use my hands, and you can see cairns everywhere that you are on this trail. You can see a cairn, and you can see your next cairn, and there you can see up ahead more cairns. So yeah, even though you can't always see the trail, although you can kind of make it out, there are cairns very generously marking the way up here. And there you can see the spot where we left Rocky Gap Road. We'll zoom in, you'll see a car parked down there. There it is. That's the place we left Rocky Gap Road. And we are as close to directly above it as you can get without climbing a Class 5 cliff. And then looking around here, you can see the area where that peak number 3 from the north would be. And at some point we'll come up here and explore these northern peaks on the Rainbow Mountains upper Crest Ridgeline. But for now, let's continue on up. Okay, now we've hit the Rocky Plateau area just before the summit of the upper Crest Ridgeline, And you can see, let's take a look if this comes through. You see a cairn up there on top of the plateau. That cairn, I guess you could go straight for it, but what I suggest is rather than going straight up that, just skirt that little bluff to the left and then continue on upward. Makes it a lot easier. And there you can see the upper Crest Ridgeline. Of course, it's still affected by the rising sun, but you get an idea where we are, just below the upper Crest Ridgeline. So most of our altitude has been gained. The wind just blew my phone. Sorry for that jump there. Now we're looking over at the Keystone Thrust. And then here's something right in the center. Griffith Peak is beginning to emerge. We'll zoom out a little to get a larger picture of where we are. Rocky Gap Road, by the way, way far below us at this point. So here you can see the Keystone Thrust again. Larger view. There is the upper Crest Ridgeline just above us. I'm not in a very secure spot right now, so I hope it doesn't wobble too much. And there you go. We're going to get up to the summit of that ridgeline, take a right, and then continue on toward North Peak. And maybe today we'll just cover the area between here and North Peak and make a circuit, head down Rocky Gap Road back to the Willow Springs area. And then next time we'll take Rocky Gap Road all the way up, save us some time, and catch the upper ridgeline at the top of Rocky Gap Road. Be a lot faster. Then we'll go further north. But did I say north? I meant further south. To the right is south. To the left is north. And there, by the way, one of these days we'll come up here and we'll just explore the very northern portion of the upper Crest Ridgeline. And that would be this area right in here. Okay, onward. Okay, here as we continue to ascend, you can see Griffith Peak emerging even more so. And you can see the extent of the Keystone Thrust line. Rocky Gap Road below us, Keystone Thrust. Let's trace it. And there you can see it all the way to the furthest extent to which we can look at this point. And then here, it's just getting incredibly beautiful. Love this area. The trees are now looking much more like bonsai trees, artistically placed in the Jurassic era sandstone. And look at this. That's the ledge we were on not long ago. And then that area that we are looking, sorry about the move here. That area we were looking to summit, the bluff that was that we were going to summit to the left. Now you can see it directly above us. I'll try to get up there without shaking too much. No promises. Yeah. So here's that bluff right here. And as I mentioned, you skirt it to the left, and sure enough, there are some cairns here. You get right up on this little ledge below the bluff and just skirt it to the left, and you reach a nice plateau above. And believe me, the trees are so beautiful here. Just a miracle plateau. If you're a painter, this would be a great place to come. Okay, now we're on top of that bluff, and you see Rocky Gap Road below us. We've come almost straight up from that point. But just look at the view up here. This is where all the trees begin to look like beautiful bonsai trees. Now in the signature Rainbow Mountains area with these views, just amazing. And there you can see Rocky Gap Road below us. The Keystone Thrust on the other side of the canyon. Let's zoom in on Griffith Peak. And you can even see Harris Mountain to the right of Griffith Peak. Griffith Peak. There's that saddle. Harris Mountain. And you can look at the Griffith Harris or Harris Griffith page, either one. There's one of each where I took that saddle in either direction from Griffith to Harris. So now we continue upward. The most challenging of the ascent is behind us now. Now it's much more beautiful and easier. So this is where you get the reward for all the work below. Well, here we are on the ridge line. We're not at the very edge where we can see in both directions, but what a great view of the La Madre Mountains. And you can actually see El Bastardo, and then I'll move over to Burnt Peak and El Padre Mountain, and then I think there's a view of La Madre Mountain actually. So let's take a look. Okay, there's Burnt Peak, looking straight at it on the left. And then we move over this direction and we have El Padre Mountain. On the other side of Burnt Peak is El Bastardo. Okay, El Bastardo, Burnt Peak, El Padre, and I believe that might be La Madre over there. What a great viewpoint there. But that's not all that's up here. Wow, there is a whole lot more. Look at the bonsai trees all around us. It is just one of the most amazing plateaus in the Rainbow Mountains. You're looking north towards the north edge of the Rainbow Mountains, and we'll go explore that in the future time. But yeah, look at different rock formations. And what we're going to do today, we're going to ascend in this direction south along the Upper Crest Ridgeline, but we are basically on the Upper Crest Ridgeline. You'll see it more clearly when we top this next area ahead. But for now, wow, look around you. Yeah, if you had a bonsai garden, this is what you'd be trying to copy in the miniature. Here it's all around us, and you don't need to take care of it. it's gonna live and thrive regardless of what you do. And there, by the way, is a great view of Griffith Peak, and you can see to the right is Harris Mountain, and to the right of that is either Charleston Peak. I think it's Mummy Mountain, actually. So let's zoom in. Griffith, Saddle, Harris, and I think that's Mummy Mountain. Can't see Charleston Peak from here. The views are just non-stop up here. An artist couldn't have placed all the scenery better than what we're seeing here. Here's a good shot of Bridge Mountain. And then there's Rainbow Mountain. Let's get around it a little bit. Okay, Rainbow Mountain. And you can see the very tip of Potosi Mountain. You'll see the communication towers on top. And then we look around, and now you're seeing the upper Crest Ridgeline. We will be taking this ridgeline as we go. So we'll be up there soon. And here's one of the more amazing, beautiful rock formations up here. Repeated nowhere else on Earth. And there you can see Griffith Peak right through, framed in this formation. And there's our path upward to the upper Crest Ridgeline, and then we'll just work our way along the ridgeline. Bridge Mountain framed by this amazing rock formation. Higher perspective of this amazing area. There's looking north along the Rainbow Mountains, upper Crest Ridgeline. There is the La Madre Mountains Wilderness, Keystone Thrust. Another shot of Griffith Peak, Harris Mountain, and I believe Mummy Mountain to the right. And then you can see the demarcation line between the Jurassic stone and the ridge itself. And I believe that demarcation line is the Keystone Thrust line. And there we're looking south along the Keystone Thrust over to Potosi Mountain in the far background, Rainbow Mountain, Bridge Mountain, and then back to this amazing plateau. Okay, here's something I just noticed. You're going to see Damsel Peak. You'll see the crescent shape of the peak, and then to the left and way beyond you will see Gas Peak. Damsel Peak, Gas Peak, right in the center. Okay, here's the first stretch of the upper Crest Ridgeline heading south. And you can see the ridge line. We're going to take this all the way over. I think that might be North Peak. So we're going to go just beyond North Peak and then head down to Rocky Gap Road, which is below us, and you can see it winding along in the canyon. and then continuing to look around. Mount Charleston Wilderness, Griffith Peak, Harris Mountain, Mummy Mountain, and then we have a nice bush here. Let's look in the other direction. I mainly wanted to show the pathway of the upper Crest Ridgeline here, and then over to Bridge Mountain. Okay, let's carry on. By the way, the key to this ridgeline is you stay as close to the outer edge, the right side of the ridge, as you can. If you drop a little bit, then reascend as close as you can get to the right side of this ridge where the drop-off is down here. You don't want to descend too far to the left, or you end up having to reascend a whole lot. So what I'm going to do is head straight up toward that high point right in the center. And more views of Rainbow Mountain, Bridge Mountain, as the sun angle of the sun improves the quality of the images. And now for the first time, you can look down into the Las Vegas Valley and see the strip right in the center. Let's zoom in on all this. There's Bridge Mountain. And Rainbow Mountain. And I think beyond Rainbow Mountain, now you can see the difference between Rainbow Mountain and behind it would be Mount Wilson. As I mentioned, stay as close to your right as possible. And you can see when you've reached the furthest point to the right, yeah, it's pretty obvious. But we're going to ascend this rise up ahead and then continue onward on this ridge. And just looking around, coming into even better view as the sun angles along, is Rainbow Mountain. Mount Wilson is behind it. And Bridge Mountain. And we'll get better views of the strip as soon as the sun angle changes enough. It's pretty hazy right now. And then you can see the area we have been navigating, and right on the edge. And that's what you need to do if you're going to avoid a lot of descent and reascent. So yeah, continue right along the edge, and we'll head right up the edge, the right side of that rocky formation up ahead. A lot more coming into view now. You can see, I believe that's White Rock Mountain right in the center. And the Keystone thrust behind. And there we're tracing the northern edge of the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline. And looking down into Red Rock Canyon, and beyond it, of course, is the Strip. Still not the best view. Need the sun to move just a little bit more. Okay. Bridge Mountain. Rainbow Mountain, Mount Wilson. And then here's the extent of the Upper Crest Ridgeline up to North Peak. And then looking down in this direction, you can see Rocky Gap Road and the summit of Rocky Gap Road, where you'll notice cars are parked, or four-wheel drive vehicles, I should say, and that's where you drive up to that point to take the shortcut to Bridge Mountain, as opposed to what I'm doing here. Bridge Mountain and North Peak shortcut. And of course, more of the Mount Charleston Wilderness. Griffith Peak on the left. Harris Mountain next to the right after the saddle. And then Mummy Mountain. And here we have Angel Peak. And then looking back on that amazing area where we first topped the ridge line. Where all the bonsai trees are. You recognize that rock? We looked through it to see Griffith Peak framed. And then here's the next stretch up to North Peak. You see we've got one high point before we hit North Peak. And here's the next stretch on the north portion of the Upper Crest Ridgeline up to North Peak. And by the way, there is a little trail here. You don't want to depend on it because it can easily disappear on you, especially if you take a wrong turn. You want to stick to the, as I mentioned, to the upper ridge here and hug the right side, and you can see a little bit of the trail ahead. And if you do that, hugging the right side, the trail will appear and disappear. So you'll see it often. And let's take a look down. There you see Another shot of Rainbow Mountain and Mount Wilson behind it to the right. And here's Bridge Mountain. Get a little more idea of the approaches to Bridge Mountain. We'll get a better view of all of that when we're on top of North Peak. And then looking around to that plateau area we were on earlier, where we first summited the ridgeline. We're in that beautiful Jurassic bonsai tree area. But actually, oh yeah, and Red Rock Canyon, really nice view. I don't know if we'll get as good a view. By the time we get up to North Peak, there might be a few things blocking it, so I want to point that out now. And by the way, Turtlehead Peak, familiar to many. Okay, and the La Madre Mountains, the Keystone Thrust ridgeline you can see in the background. So with that said, boy, it's beautiful up here. It's just you don't expect to see anyone on this trail. So have everything you need and everyone that you need with you because you're not going to see anyone. Okay, a lot more is visible from here. We're looking straight at North Peak, and it is like being on top of North Peak is like being on the turret of a medieval castle. We'll go up there in just a little bit. And there is some class 3 climbing involved, but light enough for me, which means you could probably do it too. And then looking over at the Mount Charleston Wilderness, and you can see Mummy Mountain and to the right of that, Fletcher Peak, actually. So let's take a look. Fletcher Peak, Mummy Mountain, Harris Mountain, Griffith Peak. So this is the best view we've had so far. And then as we look around, there you can see we're looking down to the location where we summited the Upper Crest Ridgeline on those Jurassic red rock bonsai hills there. So you can see the terrain, and then wow, look in this direction. We're looking at the Calico Hills in Red Rock Canyon, and beyond that that red area, I think that's Craft Mountain area beyond the Calico Hills. And then looking straight at Damsel Peak, the crescent-shaped summit, and just below it and a little bit to the right is Turtlehead Peak. And then of course the Keystone Thrust ridgeline and the La Madre Mountains. And here's a shot of Bridge Mountain with the Las Vegas Strip in the background just to the left. So there you have it. Now let's head up to that medieval turret called North Peak. Okay, ascent routes up to North Peak. I think I'm going to take this route straight up the side of this little area. Now there's another route that one could take. A lot of loose rock here. And that would be around the corner here. Maybe I'll descend that route. So let's go ahead and I have to put my phone down and ascend this crack here. Changed my mind, chickened out. I went around the corner. I'm gonna ascend this way, and it looks much more gradual, more fitting for this non-rock climber. Well, regardless of how you get here, the goal is to get up to the summit, which is where we are, the summit of North Peak. I found an easier route, and of course I took it. Okay, there you can see the upper Crest Ridgeline continuing. And then of course there's the huge gap between the northern ridgeline and the southern ridgeline. And you can see both on Las Vegas area trails. Just look in the Rainbow Mountains section, and let's look down on Mount Wilson and Rainbow Mountain. Mount Wilson to the right, Rainbow Mountain to the left. And then looking over at Bridge Mountain, and the approach to Bridge Mountain is actually from this ridgeline. You see right about in the center there, just above the rock in the foreground, is where you descend to Rocky Gap Road, or you ascend from Rocky Gap Road, take a right along the ridgeline, and then descend. There's a ridge there that you descend, circle around, and then over to the base of Bridge Mountain. And then I'm still not, that's not Bridge Mountain, sorry. Over to the base of Bridge Mountain. Let's continue here. Yes. No, that was Rainbow Mountain. I would have you in the wrong mountain. Yeah, over to the base of Bridge Mountain. And then I'm not sure exactly how one ascends. I think one would go around. There's a gully right in the center there. And I think one goes up that gully and then around the far side of Bridge Mountain and then up to the summit. That's my guess based on the terrain. I don't see any other way that looks real doable without major exposure, and there's no way I want to do that. Then you can see Las Vegas Strip just beyond Bridge Mountain, a little bit to the left. This is probably the best view of the strip we're going to get for today. Red Rock Canyon. Isn't this spot amazing? Like I said, it's like the turret of a medieval castle. 360-degree view. And there you have it. Okay, now what we're going to do is descend, not here. This is the place that I decided not to ascend for obvious reasons. And what we're going to do is just take the south side of this mountain, which is the best approach and descent if you're looking for something that is the easiest way to get up to this spot. And then we're going to take the trail down to the summit of Rocky Gap Road and then run Rocky Gap Road back down to Willow Springs in Red Rock Canyon. Okay, descending North Peak by way of the Wimp's route, right down this nice south side, gradual, at least more gradual than any other approach, and then along the ridgeline to where we're going to turn to the right and descend to Rocky Gap Road. Pretty much over that ridge ahead is the big gap, and everything on this side is the northern upper Crest Ridgeline. Everything on the far side, and you would see Hidden Peak, Mountain Spring Peak, and Potosi Mountain in the far background there. All of that is the southern upper Crest Ridgeline, and there's this huge gap in between. So in a future trip we'll go to the edge of that ridgeline and at least the edge of the gap on this side, and just see what's involved in descending that gap and crossing it. And by the way, in the gap, you can take the gap between Lowell Canyon and down the near side of Mount Wilson and end up at First Creek. The person that showed me this option is Glenn, and he's been really good to give me all kinds of directions as far as how to make that crossing from Lovell Canyon to First Creek trailhead. So we'll do that at some point. And I forget whether I gave the view back to Bridge Mountain and North Peak, but there they are. So very beautiful, relatively untouched area up here. Although, as I said, there is a little trail, if you can piece it together, that spans this upper crest northern ridgeline. There's one on the southern ridgeline too. I don't know that there's anything that'll take you through the gap. We'll find out. Maybe there is. And then right between Bridge Mountain on the left and Rainbow Mountain on the right, you're looking down on Blue Diamond Mountain. We'll be exploring that in the next few months. I understand there's a cave up there and some pretty cool things to discover. Okay, now we're at the point where you have a choice. You can either go down, descend. It's about half, 3/4 of a mile, I believe, to to the Rocky Gap Road. This heads down to Rocky Gap Road. This heads over to North Peak. And I believe this heads over to Bridge Mountain. So there you see the connectors up here. So now I'm going to put the phone down for a bit and do some running down to Rocky Gap Road. Maybe I'll show a little bit of the trail. It's a very good trail, so you cannot get lost between here and Rocky Gap Road. Then we'll head down Rocky Gap Road to Willow Spring. And just to give you an idea of this little trail from the ridgeline to Rocky Gap Road, it's a pretty nice trail. And this is one of the rockier sections of the trail, but definitely you cannot get lost. And already after maybe 10 minutes, taking it pretty easy at a light run. We're closing in on Rocky Gap Road below. So, yeah, continuing on. Well, just 15 minutes gets us from the upper Crest Ridgeline up there down to Rocky Gap Road and the parking area just ahead. And we'll see how long it takes to get from this point down to the base of Rocky Gap Road at the Willow Springs area in Red Rock Canyon, where we started. So here we are. And again, if you want to save a little extra time, then you will want to drive your very rugged four-wheel drive vehicle up to this point and then take this trail right here up to the ridgeline, and then you can go either to North Peak or to Bridge Mountain, probably both, since North Peak is not too far to the left. Bridge Mountain is a lot further. Okay. So yeah, just giving you an idea of where we are. We are now on just above Rocky Gap Road. So 15 minutes from the ridgeline down that great trail to upper Rocky Gap Road. Let's see how long it takes us now to take a light run down Rocky Gap Road to Willow Springs. You're about to see the type of vehicle that can handle Rocky Gap Road a lot easier than your sedan. You can hear it coming. Here it comes. Okay, in much better lighting and from above, we're looking at the ridge and the point at which we summited the upper North Rainbow Crest Ridgeline. And I'm going to zoom in and then trace down from our summit point to, which is just to the left of some rocky formations. I'm going to trace downward to Rocky Gap Road. Okay, see, to the left of those rocks, on the right, is the ridge line. That's the ridge line that we took, and wow, the difference between taking that ridge line and taking Rocky Gap Road is probably at least 3 hours. So, okay, continuing down Rocky Gap Road, and I'll pause at the point where we begin to ascend up to the upper Crest Ridgeline up there. Let's take another quick look at Rocky Gap Road, and here's what your vehicle would be facing at this point on Rocky Gap Road, and it gets even more interesting. So yeah, wow. So I know a lot of people who have four-wheel drive vehicles that would not take them on this road due to the wear and tear on your vehicle from even one trip. Look at this. More rocks on Rocky Gap Road, but what I wanted to show you is, oh, look at that road. Wow. Here's a little pull-out with a picnic table. Cement, so it's going to be there for a while. And so you can actually camp here, and it's not too far from where we left this road this morning, but wow, every time a wash crosses this road, you have boulders. So yeah, it's quite the rugged experience on your vehicle. Okay, we'll call this little section the Revenge of Rocky Gap Road. Rocky Gap Road. Just when you feel like you've made it through all the worst parts of the road, here you are in this section. You might as well be in a riverbed. Look at the boulders here. Wow. Oh my gosh. I can't imagine driving a vehicle over this. Of course, a lot of people do it, and they probably have a lot of fun, and it's a challenge. But, oh my gosh. Okay, you'll remember this spot. This is where we left Rocky Gap Road this morning. And you can see on the truck on the left and still here. And you can see a cairn on the right. That's where we took the little trail. So just to give you an idea of time difference, it took me about 35 minutes at the most, maybe even 30, to descend down Rocky Gap Road to this point. It took me something like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 hours to ascend to the upper Crest Ridgeline. And now you can see the ridge a lot better. Let's take a closer look at it. Anyway, it took about 5 hours between ascending to the upper Crest Ridgeline and then navigating along the summit of the upper Crest Ridgeline. But yeah, now that it's in the light, much better view. You can see the ridge, the approach ridge that took us up there. Let's take a closer look. We'll descend that ridge. Here we go. Right down to this point. So, yeah, gives you an idea of the time difference. And so, what I'm going to do when I want to push a little further along the upper Crest Ridgeline, I'll take Rocky Gap Road. Probably take me, it may take up to an hour to ascend the road because I'm not going to be running up this road. And once I reach the summit where you saw the parking area, when we descended from the ridge up there and down to Rocky Gap Road, when you see that parking area, I will head up to the upper Crest Ridgeline and continue on in the southern direction. But yeah, here's a great view. Everything's in the light that was not in the light earlier today. Of course, the sun is blanking us out in that direction, but here you can see again. And maybe you can recognize some of those rocks, especially up in this area. Yeah, once we left that Jurassic bonsai area, we skirted the top of these boulders and headed on up to along the Rainbow Mountain upper Crest Ridgeline. Okay, better view of the upper Crest Ridgeline and looking at the northernmost peaks on the upper Crest Ridgeline in the Rainbow Mountains. There's number 3. And then tracing our way to peak number 2. Then you see White Rock Mountain in the distance. Here's that far northern peak. So there's a good idea of how things look in the light. And you see the Keystone Thrust in the background. So yeah, White Rock Mountain. Peak number 2. Up to peak number 3. There again, peak number 2. Peak number 3. And then you can see where we summited the ridgeline and then started heading south. And by the way, just so you can see below us, it's pretty hostile down there. But one could take this gully and ascend up to peak number 2 from the northernmost peak in the Rainbow Mountains. Closing in on Willow Springs. Rainbow Mountains on this side of us. Different lighting than this morning. Keystone Thrust. White Rock Mountain. And home stretch to Willow Springs. Back at Willow Springs. Okay, and here we are. Back at the Beast. Do you think the Beast would last long on Rocky Gap Road? I think not.